The radio crackled with static over the Pacific at 3:40 hours, and every pilot in the Combat Air Patrol went silent. Not because of what was said, but because of who said it. The voice was calm, almost bored, cutting through the frequency like a scalpel through silk. Ghost Rider pushing Angels to zero, your 12 o'clock is clear. The F-22 Raptor pilots exchanged glances through their oxygen masks, confusion rippling through the formation. Ghost Rider wasn't on the roster. Ghost Rider wasn't even supposed to exist anymore. The designation had been retired 8 years ago after the Kandahar incident, buried in classified folders that only a handful of people had clearance to read. Yet here it was, transmitted from somewhere in the darkness above them, coordinates that shouldn't have had any aircraft. Major Kyle Ashford keyed his mic twice, the standard acknowledgement, but his hand trembled slightly against the throttle. He'd heard the stories in the ready room, whispered over terrible coffee during pre-dawn briefs. A pilot who flew like the aircraft was an extension of her nervous system. A woman who'd walked away from the cockpit after a mission went sideways, vanished into the civilian world flying 737s between Seattle and San Diego. They said she'd lost her edge. They said she couldn't handle the pressure. They said a lot of things. The night sky offered no answers, just the scattered lights of the carrier battle group 30,000 feet below and the distant glow of a typhoon system crawling across the Philippine Sea. Ashford's radar was clean. His wingman reported the same. But someone was up there, high and fast, watching them with sensors that made their fifth-generation fighters look like crop dusters. The tactical frequency remained quiet for another 40 seconds. Then it came again, that same unhurried voice, flat and professional. Bandit group bearing 095, 70 miles and closing. 4 aircraft. They're not squawking friendly. Ashford's blood went cold. The E-3 Sentry AWACS plane hadn't called it. His own radar hadn't painted it, but Ghost Rider had. He checked his data link, cross-referenced the threat board, and felt his stomach drop. There they were, 4 contacts materializing on his display like ghosts stepping through fog. Chinese J-20 stealth fighters, pushing hard toward the carrier group, flying in electronic silence. Someone had been watching them long before they became a problem. Someone with capabilities that shouldn't exist outside of Area 51 fever dreams. The formation tightened instinctively, muscle memory overriding confusion. Ashford's weapons system officer began running intercept calculations, but before he could transmit new orders, Ghost Rider spoke again. Recommend Vector 270 maintain current altitude. They're trying to bait you low. There was something in that voice now, barely perceptible. Not quite amusement, but close. The tone of someone who'd seen this play before, who knew how it ended. Ashford made a decision that would either save his career or end it. He followed the Phantom's advice, rolling his Raptor onto the new heading, trusting a voice that had no right to be there. His wingmen followed without question, 4 gray predators slicing through the darkness, their pilots wondering who the hell was actually in command. The Chinese fighters adjusted immediately, their formation fragmenting as they realized the trap hadn't worked. Ghost Rider had read their playbook and rewritten the ending. The tactical frequency erupted with controlled chaos, pilots calling positions and weapons status, but underneath it all was a single burning question nobody dared ask aloud. Where was she? What was she flying? And why had command kept this capability buried? Ashford pushed his Raptor through a lazy barrel roll, scanning the sky above him with naked eyes, knowing his instruments were useless. Somewhere up there, beyond the reach of radar and infrared sensors, someone was flying an aircraft that officially didn't exist. The J-20s broke hard left, abandoning their approach vector, and suddenly the night felt different, heavier, like the air itself was watching. Ghost Rider say aircraft type, Ashford transmitted, protocol be damned. The response took 10 seconds, long enough that he wondered if she'd answer at all. Classified, stay focused, Raptor lead. They're not done yet. The voice carried weight now, authority that transcended rank or radio etiquette. This wasn't a suggestion. It was an order from someone who'd earned the right to give it. The Chinese formation split into pairs, executing a pincer movement that would have worked against any conventional response. But Ghost Rider wasn't conventional. "Raptor 3, spike your radar now," the voice commanded. "Full power 5 seconds, then go cold." Lieutenant Maria Voss didn't hesitate, flooding the sky with electronic energy before cutting her systems entirely, vanishing into the background noise. The effect was immediate. 2 J-20s broke hard right, their pilots reacting to what they thought was a targeting lock, exposing their flight paths to Ashford's remaining aircraft. It was textbook, but the textbook hadn't been written yet. Ghost Rider was conducting the engagement like a maestro with an orchestra, each move calculated 3 steps ahead, anticipating reactions before they happened. Ashford felt a strange mixture of awe and resentment. His people were good, the best pilots the Air Force could produce, but they were being schooled by someone who shouldn't even be in the fight. The carrier's Combat Direction Center finally broke radio silence, their transmission taut with barely controlled panic. "All aircraft be advised, we have unknown friendly providing tactical oversight. Authentication codes check valid. Acknowledge and comply." Valid authentication meant someone very senior had made a call, probably woke up an admiral to authorize whatever the hell was happening. Ashford acknowledged, his mind racing through the implications. Ghost Rider had clearance. Ghost Rider had been planned. This wasn't some rogue pilot playing hero. This was operational. The Chinese fighters maintained their aggressive posture but stopped pressing. They knew something had changed, some variable they hadn't accounted for. In the calculus of aerial combat, uncertainty was deadly. They'd come hunting an American carrier group and found themselves hunted instead. "Bandits are RTB, heading 290, Ghost Rider reported, and Ashford's radar confirmed it seconds later. The J-20s were running for home, their mission scrubbed. "Raptor lead, form on my position, bearing 045, Angels 25. Time to meet the legend." Ashford's heart hammered against his ribs. He pushed his throttles forward, climbing into the black, his wingmen stacked behind him in perfect formation. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent, bearing witness to something that would be classified for decades. At 25,000 feet, Ashford's instruments began registering something impossible. A radar return that appeared and disappeared like smoke, too clean to be natural, too precise to be atmospheric. Then he saw it. The aircraft materialized against the stars like a knife cutting silk, all sharp angles and radar-absorbent surfaces that drank light and gave nothing back. It was smaller than he expected, more elegant, a seamless fusion of lifting surfaces that seemed to flow rather than fly. No visible engines, no exhaust signature, just a dark presence that rewrote everything he thought he knew about aerospace engineering. The designation stenciled below the cockpit was barely visible, rendered in low-reflective paint. Aurora 7, Test Squadron 51, and below that smaller, almost apologetic, Ghost Rider. The canopy was darkened, the pilot invisible, but Ashford could feel her watching him, evaluating, judging whether he and his people were worth the revelation. "Nice flying, Major," the voice said, and for the first time there was warmth in it, approval earned through competence under pressure. "Tell your squadron they passed the test." Before Ashford could respond, the Aurora banked hard left and accelerated, its form blurring into the darkness with impossible speed, leaving only a whisper of disturbed air and the ghost of a radar return that his computers couldn't classify. His wingmen peppered the frequency with questions, but Ashford killed his mic and just flew, processing what he'd witnessed. The Ready Room stories had been wrong. Ghost Rider hadn't lost her edge. She'd simply been reassigned to a program so black it didn't officially exist, flying an aircraft that shouldn't be possible, protecting people who'd never know her name. 6 hours later, as dawn bled across the Pacific, Ashford sat in the carrier's intelligence center, signing non-disclosure agreements that threatened court-martial and worse. The briefing officer was a tired-looking captain with deep lines around his eyes, the kind that came from keeping too many secrets. "What you saw last night doesn't exist," he said without preamble. "The pilot doesn't exist. The aircraft doesn't exist. You will never speak of this, not to your spouse, not to your priest, not to your diary. Clear, Ashford nodded, but he had to ask. Who is she? The captain's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Someone who flew more combat hours than you have flight hours. Someone who's forgotten more about air combat than most pilots will ever learn. Someone who earned the right to be left alone but keeps coming back because she's needed. He slid a thin folder across the table, classified markings covering every surface. Inside was a single photograph, grainy and washed out, showing a woman in a flight suit standing beside an A-10 Thunderbolt, her helmet under one arm. She looked young in the photo, maybe late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun and eyes that seemed to stare through the camera rather than at it. The nameplate on her chest read SOKOLOV. Below the photo was a mission summary from Afghanistan, dated 8 years prior. Captain Alina Sokolov had flown 73 combat missions in the Warthog, most of them close air support in the Korangal Valley, where the terrain was vertical and the enemy was everywhere. Her kill record was classified, but the commendations weren't. 3 distinguished flying crosses, 2 silver stars, and a Purple Heart from a mission where she'd kept flying with half her aircraft shot away, providing cover for a trapped Marine squad until the last man was extracted. The final page detailed the incident that ended her combat career. A friendly fire situation where bad intelligence and worse communication had put her weapons on target just as civilians appeared from a building that was supposed to be empty. The investigation cleared her of wrongdoing, but she'd walked away anyway, resignation letter submitted before the ink dried on the report. She disappeared into the civilian world, flying cargo routes and passenger flights, keeping her head down and her past buried. Until someone in the Pentagon realized they had a problem. New threats emerging, near-peer adversaries fielding technology that challenged American air superiority, and a desperate need for pilots who could adapt faster than doctrine could be rewritten. So they'd found Sokolov stocking shelves at a Costco in Tacoma, working night shifts because the daylight felt too exposed, and they'd made her an offer. Fly the Aurora. Test its capabilities against real threats. Be the scalpel in the darkness that kept the carriers safe and the airspace sovereign. No parades, no recognition, just the work. She'd said yes, but only on her terms. Ghost Rider stays retired as a designation. She flies alone. No wingman to protect, no squadron to lose, just her and the machine and the night sky that asked no questions. Ashford closed the folder, his hands steady but his mind spinning. Why show us? Why reveal the program? The captain retrieved the folder, locking it in a safe that looked like it could survive a nuclear blast. Because you needed to know someone's watching. Because the next time you're out there, outnumbered and outgunned, you'll remember that voice and you'll fly better, smarter. You'll trust that someone's thinking 3 moves ahead. It made sense in a twisted way. Ghost Rider wasn't just a capability. She was a psychological weapon, a legend that would ripple through ready rooms and tactical frequencies, making enemy pilots hesitate and American crews push harder. The mythology was as important as the aircraft. Ashford stood, his legs stiff from hours of debriefing, and saluted without thinking. The captain returned it crisply. One more thing, Major. She requested you specifically for this encounter. Said she'd been monitoring your squadron's performance and thought you had potential. Take that however you want. The words hit harder than any tactical debrief. Ghost Rider had been watching them for weeks, maybe months, evaluating their capabilities from altitudes where the Earth's curve was visible. She'd chosen this moment, this engagement, as a teaching opportunity, a gift wrapped in classification notices and non-disclosure agreements. Ashford walked out into the dawn light, the carrier deck already bustling with flight operations. F-35s launching for routine patrols that suddenly felt less routine. Somewhere up there, beyond radar and eyesight, Alina Sokolov was probably already flying, her Aurora dancing through the stratosphere on missions that would never make the news. The squadron-ready room buzzed with speculation when he returned. Pilots who'd been part of the engagement clustered around coffee cups and flight computers, trying to piece together what they'd experienced. Ashford couldn't tell them the truth, but he could give them something else. "Whoever that was, they saved our asses," he said simply. "Flew like nothing I've ever seen. We should aspire to that level of skill." Lieutenant Voss looked up from her tablet, her expression thoughtful. "Think we'll ever see them again?" Ashford considered the question, remembering that darkened canopy and the voice that carried decades of hard-won experience. "Probably not, but they'll see us. And that's enough." The conversation drifted to technical speculation and tactical analysis, but Ashford's mind was elsewhere, replaying the engagement frame by frame, studying the decisions Ghost Rider had made and the timing she'd employed. It was a masterclass compressed into 20 minutes, and he'd be studying it for the rest of his career. 3 months passed before the next encounter. Ashford's squadron was running night interdiction training off the coast of Japan when the voice returned. Same frequency, same calm professionalism. "Raptor lead, you're being sloppy. Tighten your formation or you'll get picked apart." He grinned inside his oxygen mask, keying the mic. "Ghost Rider, good to hear your voice. Thanks for keeping us honest." There was a pause, then something that might have been a laugh, brief and rusty from disuse. "You're learning, Major. Keep it up." The transmission ended, but Ashford caught a flicker on his radar, there and gone, a signature that his instruments couldn't classify but his instincts recognized. She was out there, watching over them, a guardian angel with classified capabilities and a call sign that meant more than most pilots would ever understand. The mythology grew over the following year, spreading through the Pacific Fleet like wildfire. Pilots swapped stories in hushed tones, embellishing details, adding layers of legend to what was already extraordinary. Ghost Rider became a talisman, a whispered prayer before difficult missions, a reminder that someone had their back even when they couldn't see her. The Chinese and Russian military intelligence services noticed the pattern, this mysterious aircraft that appeared during critical moments, always at the edges of detection, never quite visible but undeniably present. They increased their own black program funding, racing to match capabilities they couldn't define, chasing a ghost that stayed 3 steps ahead. But in a small apartment in Virginia Beach, Alina Sokolov lived a different life. She flew her missions from Nellis Air Force Base and returned to civilian obscurity, cooking simple meals, reading novels, avoiding the veteran bars where her old squadron mates gathered. The Aurora was classified. Her identity was classified. The missions were classified. But the weight of them was hers alone, carried in the silence between takeoff and landing, in the darkness between the stars and the sea. She'd walk her neighborhood at dawn, watching commuters hurry to ordinary jobs, children waiting for school buses, life unfolding in all its mundane beauty. These were the people she protected, though they'd never know. The ones who deserved to wake up safe, to complain about traffic and worry about mortgage payments, to live free from the calculations of aerial combat and geopolitical chess. Sometimes she'd pause at the memorial wall in her building's courtyard, her fingers tracing names of neighbors who'd served and fallen. Her name wasn't there. Ghost Rider wasn't there. That was how it should be. The living didn't get memorials. They just kept flying. One evening, she received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was older, gravelly, carrying authority that didn't need to announce itself. "Captain Sokolov, this is General Bradford. I wanted to thank you personally for your service. What you're doing matters." She stood in her kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, not sure how to respond. "Thank you felt inadequate. Your welcome felt presumptuous." Finally, she settled on the truth. "I'm just doing my job, sir." Bradford chuckled, a sound like distant thunder. "No, Captain, you're doing everyone's job, better than anyone thought possible. The program's succeeding beyond projections, and that's entirely because of you. I wanted you to know that even if nobody else can say it." The call ended before she could reply, leaving her alone with the hum of her refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. She looked at the photo on her mantle, the only one she kept displayed. Her old A-10 squadron, 12 pilots grinning at the camera, young and confident, before the war taught them what combat actually cost. 6 of those faces were gone now. The rest scattered to civilian life or new assignments, carrying memories they couldn't share. She'd thought leaving would make it better, that distance from the cockpit would quiet the nightmares. But the nightmares weren't about flying. They were about stopping, about being grounded while others faced threats she knew she could counter. The Aurora program had given her purpose again, a way to use the skills that defined her without the baggage of squadron politics or public recognition. It was pure, clean, just her and the mission and the endless sky. The next morning she drove to Nellie's before dawn, passing through security checkpoints that didn't officially exist, walking into a hangar that contained an aircraft too advanced for public knowledge. The Aurora waited in the darkness, its surfaces absorbing the dim overhead lights, a predator at rest. Her ground crew chief, a master sergeant named Kowalski who'd been with the program from the start, approached with a tablet full of mission parameters. Morning, Ghost Rider. We've got intercept training scheduled for 0600, then a surveillance run along the Korean DMZ. Should be a quiet day. Alina smiled slightly, accepting the tablet. In this job, quiet is a gift. She ran through her pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency, her hands moving over control surfaces and sensor arrays, the ritual familiar and comforting. Flying the Aurora was like nothing else in her experience, the aircraft responding to inputs before she consciously made them, artificial intelligence systems anticipating her needs and adapting in real time. It was less like piloting and more like partnering, a symbiosis of human intuition and machine precision. The cockpit sealed with a hydraulic hiss, and she felt the familiar weight of isolation settle over her. No wingman chatter, no squadron frequency banter, just the whisper of environmental systems and the glow of displays that showed her the world in spectrums humans weren't meant to perceive. "Ghost Rider, you're cleared for departure," the tower transmitted, their voice professionally neutral, aware they were speaking to someone whose capabilities were beyond their security clearance. Alina advanced the throttles, the Aurora's engines producing thrust without the roar of conventional jets, some quantum state propulsion system that the engineers explained with equations she didn't need to understand. She only needed to know it worked, that it gave her speed and altitude that made her untouchable. The runway blurred beneath her, and then she was climbing, the dawn-lit desert falling away, the curvature of the earth becoming visible as she pushed through 60,000 feet and kept going. Up here, the sky transitioned from blue to black, the stars visible even in daylight, the sun a fierce point of white fire. This was her domain, the place where she'd found peace after years of searching. Major Ashford's squadron was already airborne when she reached the training area, their Raptors executing formation drills that would have been impressive to anyone who hadn't seen better. She watched them for 10 minutes, analyzing their patterns, noting the improvements since their last encounter. They'd learned, adapted, that was good. Raptor lead, Ghost Rider on station. Let's see what you've got. Ashford's response was immediate, his voice carrying confidence that hadn't been there months ago. Copy, Ghost Rider. We've been practicing. The engagement began, a carefully choreographed dance that pushed both sides to their limits. Alina threw scenarios at them that shouldn't be possible, angles of attack that violated conventional doctrine, forcing them to think creatively and trust their instincts over their training. She gave them 5 seconds to respond to each new threat, the same window they'd have in actual combat. They rose to the challenge, Ashford coordinating his squadron with increasing sophistication, covering each other's blind spots and executing maneuvers that showed genuine tactical understanding. Alina felt a flicker of pride, though she'd never voice it. These pilots represented the future, and the future looked capable. After 40 minutes, she called the training complete. Raptor lead, solid work. You're thinking three-dimensionally now. Keep that up and you'll survive what's coming. She didn't elaborate on what's coming, but the weight in her voice conveyed the message. The threats were evolving. Near-peer adversaries were fielding capabilities that closed the technology gap. Air superiority wasn't guaranteed anymore. It had to be earned every day, every mission, through skill and adaptability and the willingness to push beyond comfortable boundaries. Ashford rogered her transmission, then added something unexpected. "Ghost Rider, the squadron wanted me to pass along a message. You're an inspiration. Whatever you're flying, wherever you came from, you remind us what excellence looks like. So, thank you." Alina's throat tightened unexpectedly. She wasn't good with gratitude, didn't know how to process admiration from pilots whose respect actually mattered. "Just doing my job, Major. You do yours. That's thanks enough." She broke formation and accelerated, the Aurora responding like thought made manifest, pushing her back into the seat as the world compressed into vectors and velocities. The Korean peninsula materialized below, its border visible even from altitude, the demarcation between light and darkness that represented more than geography. She activated her surveillance systems, exotic sensors that could detect underground facilities and mobile launchers, painting a picture of the military landscape that would feed intelligence databases and inform strategic decisions. This was the unsexy part of the job, the long hours of data collection that made the tactical moments possible. But Alina found meditation in it, the discipline of maintaining perfect flight parameters while sophisticated computers recorded everything below. Hours passed. The sun tracked across the sky. Her body existed in the liminal space between consciousness and automatic function, trained reactions keeping the aircraft stable while her mind wandered through memories and questions. She thought about the Marines she'd saved in the Korangal, wondered if they were still alive, if they'd found peace in whatever came after combat. She thought about the civilians in that building, the ones she hadn't saved, their faces reconstructed from after-action reports and guilty imagination. The Aurora's systems chimed, breaking her reverie. New contacts, multiple aircraft scrambling from a Chinese base near the border, their flight paths aggressive and clearly intended to probe American responses. She was 80 miles away, in international airspace but positioned to observe whatever developed. "Ghost Rider to Combat Direction Center. I have eyes on new activity. Recommend elevating alert status." The response came from a different voice this time, younger, female, probably an intelligence officer monitoring the classified frequencies. "Copy, Ghost Rider. We're tracking. Maintain position and observe." The Chinese aircraft were J-16 fighters, older generation but still capable, flying in a tight formation that suggested experienced pilots. They pushed toward the maritime border, testing response times, gathering electronic intelligence on American radar networks. Standard cat-and-mouse games, but with stakes that could escalate unpredictably. Alina watched dispassionately, her sensors recording their emissions signatures and flight characteristics, adding data points to the vast collection that helped predict enemy capabilities. They came within 30 miles of the carrier group, close enough to be provocative but not quite close enough to justify engagement. Professional harassment, delivered with calculated precision. Then one of the J-16s broke formation, its flight path changing abruptly, heading directly toward the last known position of an American destroyer. The move was too aggressive, too sudden, suggesting either a rogue pilot or an authorized escalation. Either way, it was her problem now. Combat direction. Ghost Rider is moving to intercept. One bandit has broken row parameters. She didn't wait for acknowledgement, diving from altitude in a controlled plunge that turned the Aurora into a meteor, its heat signature masked by exotic materials and active cooling systems. 30,000 feet, 20,000, 15,000, the ocean resolving into individual whitecaps and the destroyer becoming visible, its Aegis radar no doubt tracking the incoming threat and calculating firing solutions. The J-16 pilot probably didn't know she was there until her aircraft materialized 300 feet off his wing, appearing from nowhere like a vengeful spirit. She switched to the international emergency frequency, her voice carrying the flat certainty of someone prepared to escalate as far as necessary. "Chinese fighter, you are violating international protocols and approaching a United States Navy vessel. Alter course immediately or you will be engaged." There was a long pause, probably the pilot radioing his command for instructions, trying to understand where this new threat had come from. Alina waited, her weapons systems armed but not locked, giving him the chance to make the smart choice. The J-16 began a slow turn, banking away from the destroyer, its pilot clearly deciding that discretion outweighed whatever orders he'd received. The rest of the formation followed, reforming at a safer distance, their mission compromised by the appearance of an aircraft they couldn't track or counter. Combat direction: threat has been neutralized. Bandits are RTB. The intelligence officer's response carried audible relief. Outstanding work, Ghost Rider. The destroyer's captain asked me to pass along his gratitude. They had weapons solutions, but your intervention prevented a potential incident. Alina acknowledged and climbed back to altitude, her adrenaline already subsiding. The brief confrontation just another data point in a career full of them. This was the job, not the glory of dogfights or the recognition of victory, but the quiet prevention of disasters, the maintenance of peace through the credible threat of overwhelming capability. She was a deterrent made flesh, a reminder that American airspace was guarded by more than what appeared on radar. The flight back to Nellie's took 3 hours, the Nevada desert appearing like a wrinkled tan blanket under the afternoon sun. She landed with the precision of long practice, the Aurora touching down so smoothly that the impact was barely perceptible. The hangar doors closed behind her, sealing away the aircraft and its secrets, returning her to a world of paperwork and debriefs and carefully worded reports that would be read by people whose names she'd never know. Master Sergeant Kowalski met her at the bottom of the boarding ladder, his weathered face creased with something that might have been approval. "Heard the radio traffic, Captain. Nice flying." She pulled off her helmet, her hair matted with sweat, her body stiff from hours in the cockpit. "Just another day, Sergeant." But they both knew that wasn't true. Every mission was unique, every decision carried weight, every moment in the Aurora represented capabilities that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. She was flying the future, testing doctrine that wouldn't be written for decades, establishing precedents that would shape air combat for generations. The debriefing lasted 2 hours, intelligence officers and program managers picking apart every second of the mission, extracting lessons and evaluating system performance. Alina answered their questions with professional detachment, her mind already moving ahead to the next flight, the next threat, the next opportunity to prove that the Aurora program was more than just experimental technology. That night back in her apartment, she stood on her balcony watching the stars emerge, Venus bright on the western horizon, the same stars she'd seen from altitude just hours before. Down here, they seemed farther away, less real, filtered through atmosphere and light pollution. But she knew the truth. The distance wasn't real. It was just perspective, the same way her service looked different depending on who was looking. To the Pentagon, she was a strategic asset, a capability that justified black budgets and classified oversight. To the pilots she protected, she was a legend, a guardian angel whose existence could only be glimpsed. To herself, she was just Alina Sokolov, a pilot who'd found purpose in the margins, doing work that mattered in ways that would never be publicly acknowledged. And somehow, that was enough.